announcement from Corey Turner of North Valley Legal Services.
I was going to say, if we stand in the center, then
Oh, sorry.
you can see right there.
All right. Well, to everyone on YouTube, I'm sorry you have to see this. I'm Corey Turner. I'm with Legal Services of Northern California. Thank you so much, Andrea, for letting me crash this. As you can see, I'm not on the slide. We are going to be having an estate planning clinic on Saturday, January 26th. I will be passing these around so you don't have to worry about memorizing what I'm saying. This clinic will be by appointment only, so call our office at 345-9491. Again, that will be on the flyer. This is for people who have lost estate planning documents and need to replace them, wills, trusts, powers of attorney, advanced healthcare directives, or if because of this disaster you have realized that you need to have these documents. Again, this is appointment only, so please call 345-9491 to make an appointment before they fill up. And thank you so much for
And how much will it cost to attend?
It is 100% free, regardless of income, for anyone who is a campfire survivor. Thank you for that pointed question. I appreciate that. And without further ado.
Okay. And then our next special guest is Supervisor Doug Teeter, and Doug represents Paradise, and he's a resident also of that region. And so Doug, if you want to say a few words and maybe explain a little bit about the debris removal with opt-out decisions. Thank you.
Sure. I might go stand where I was told to stand. So anyway, welcome. Sorry to all of you that have lost homes. Today is the total loss. Tomorrow night is partial loss. So I'm just kind of curious, how many heard about this through social media? Quite a bit. And then we saw email. So, I mean, that's one of the biggest challenges is getting the word out. And I just want to say a little bit of you passing along information to your neighbors that you may see is really important, especially with the debris removal. There's a deadline for the state program of January 31st, and then there's a opt-out or an alternative program, let me use the correct phrase, where you can hire a private contractor, and that has a February 28th deadline. So again, the state, that's with the right of entry form, January 31st. How many people know what they're doing, either the state or the alternative? So that's good. The best way to find out is through the internet of ButteCountyRecovers.org, or you can always call my executive assistant, Robin, at 552-5000. Again, 552-5000. But the ButteCountyRecovers.org has all the information, and then it's really easy to get. So,
is that 530 area code?
Yeah, sorry, 530. So why these tight deadlines? People have asked, with 16,000 structures destroyed, there's a lot of worry that some people just they've gone on with their lives. They've gotten possibly their insurance proceeds, and so they're not going to engage in cleanup. It happened a little bit with the Concal fire. That was a smaller amount. 7 people chose to do nothing, and the county abated or sent abatement notices. 6 luckily said, "Oh, we're going to clean up now." 1 didn't, and that's the most expensive way to have your property cleaned up, because the county pays prevailing wages. Now, by having an expedited road map to the abatement process for these people that may not be, either have the capacity or they just don't want to engage, when the state's here with their workers, the state has said they will do the cleanup. That is very important, because if the county does the abatement, that usually ends up a lien on their property, and then they could lose their property, which I think would be extremely unfair. So that's part of making it rapid. So I apologize if that's an inconvenience. But January 31st is a very important day if you want to use the state. I'll just leave it at that. And I appreciate the opportunity. I want to call out to the rural county representatives of California. I'll get to your question in a second. There's 36 rural counties that belong. Butte's one of them. I'm the appointed person from our board to go visit with them monthly in Sacramento to try to change federal and state laws to benefit rural counties. And they funded United Policyholders to be here. So it's a great organization, and I'm proud to serve, and you can be a part of it. And man, you had a question.
If that's what they do for February, for those who want to do it, the contractor, what was that date?
February 28th, end of February. Yes, ma'am.
So I'm going to have to do a hybrid, and so I signed up for the county. And no and there are a couple of things like an above ground swimming pool that they will not take on sidewalk and driveway. No one has told me that, and that'll have to be done probably after the group investigation. Do I still have to get to sign in? It's not opting out of the county. Do I have to sign in for February because I have 2 bids for contractors, but I don't know who to go with.
So I've been to a lot of those state debris removal meetings, and I generally don't like speaking for the state just in case I say something wrong. But they have a number that you can call, and a lot of the conversation about properties burning, I believe like if it's an in-ground pool, they will just mark it off and they won't move. But they've talked about like if you have a qualifying structure and that's something over 120 square feet, and then you have some outbuildings that aren't 120 square feet or car, they said they're gonna take that. So if you put it on your ROE, they may take it. Yes, ma'am.
I've been through all of that. They won't take it because it's submitted.
Oh, because it's submitted.
But the main thing is, I will have to have some done by private. Do I have to file that private thing by February 15th if I've already filed with the county to do what the county will take?
I don't know the answer. I would, if you file the ROE and then that additional, because it's not a burnt structure, I imagine you don't need, but let me get that answer for you. I'll get your name and number and get that answer, because that's, when I don't know, I want to get you the right information. So, yeah, I'm sorry. She has a concrete pool or above ground pool that she's asked the state, would they remove, and they're saying that they won't. So she's gonna have to hire a private company to remove that. And you're aware that if you save receipts for that, okay. So to reiterate, if you have something that the state doesn't take and you use the state program, and then you have like, say in her case, a concrete pool, or maybe your concrete driveway that led to your garage, you can have that removed by someone else. You save that receipt, and then when the county comes to collect, if you have the kind of insurance that says there's like 5% for debris removal, a specific debris removal, that receipt will knock off from that total. So like in my case, I have a place that's 25 grand of debris removal per my insurance company. And they gave me a letter saying, this is your debris removal. Pretty nice, farmer's been great. I have a big exposed aggregate concrete slab leading to my garage that I know the state won't take. So the state will clean up the house, then I'll hire someone to take the concrete away, and I'll save that receipt. And then say it's $1,000 to take that concrete away, I'll owe the county who pays the state 24 grand plus that receipt. So that's what it is about. So.
Well, then you've answered my question. If you didn't have to file by February for the private, then we won't have to be filed.
No, if you, it's the ash debris that needs to have a system to remove. If you want the state, it's January 31st, but you have another month if you want to do it privately. But things that don't have ash debris, like your concrete slab, is this clear as mud? Or,
Thanks.
okay, we can always talk offline, because we're really here to hear Amy and the great advice that United Policyholders, and I'm proud to support what they're presenting for us, because it's really going to benefit our community. So let me If anyone has debris removal, I'll do my best. You can ask me offline. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doug. And again, ButteCountyRecovers.org, if you haven't been going there, there is a lot of, I think, very clear information about the debris removal program there. And again, we bring this program wherever we can when there's a wildfire. And this coordinated debris removal has kind of become the norm now in California. And every time we seem to be getting it a little bit better and better organized. So again, you hear rumors, and my recommendation is that you just get facts and you make your decision based on the information that the county has put out there. So, and I know there've been a number of meetings on this, and I really appreciate that Supervisor Teeter, threw out his phone number and again, I think tiny little silver lining, we look for them wherever we can. Where your elected officials have also lost their homes, you can be sure that you have advocates that are really in your local government that are really on the same page as you. So our next special guest is Joel Loucher with the California Department of Insurance. Joel, you can either say hello now or you can say hello later. It's up to you.
I can say hello now,
Okay.
and I'll say some other things later.
Okay, and thank you, and United Policyholders, we have our area of expertise, insurance, but because it touches on so many other areas, the law and construction, we do a lot of partnering, and that's why Maitreya is helping with Click, and that's why Doug is here, and that's why Joel is here. Because it takes a network to get all of you back in a safe, with a roof over your head and all that safe place. Okay, and we do appreciate, of course, the rural county funding. So about us, again, very quickly, we're a charity, 501c3, which means we're tax exempt, which means that our charter is to be an educational resource. We also are an advocate for insurance consumers and disaster survivors around the country. This is part of what we call the Roadmap to Recovery, which is basically our program that we bring that seeks to give you the information to help you make the decisions on your road to recovery. And it doesn't have a set end. We find very often that particularly wildfire recovery, where everything's gone, it takes a lot longer than people typically think, and nothing like a year or even 2 years. It's kind of stretching a little longer, and the law has been stretching with you. And we'll talk about that a little bit later in terms of you have time. Time is on your side here. The only thing that is really pressing on you right now, I think, is this coordinated removal decision. But all the decisions around your insurance, you have plenty of time to make. So that's something I really want you guys to digest. And same goes with decisions about whether you're going to rebuild, relocate. The important message I want you to know is that you can take your time, even if you are getting pressured by commercial people or anybody really. Okay, so we're funded by donations and grants. A lot of the people that work through our organization are people who themselves lost a home. They got a lot of information, they have a lot of empathy, and they're paying that forward. We also have a lot of professional volunteers. We have public adjusters that have expertise that we tap. We have lawyers that have expertise that we tap, CPAs and that kind of thing. And you can visit our website anytime, all the time, uphelp.org. We can move through this. Tonight we brought the little yellow book. I don't think we had a whole lot of those the last time. That's a very kind of basic guide. A lot of the chapters were written by people who walked the path that you're walking now. And then the whole second half of the book, for those of you who are not big internet users, can help you remember and things that you lost so that you can put together a contents inventory if you're required to do that. We also have given all of you this journal, I don't know, some people think the word diary sounds like, teenage girl, so we can say journal. But the point is that we've given you a tool to help you live our guidance, which is just paper trail this thing as much as you can. Just write things down as you go. And the journal is broken up into 3 sections so that you can keep track of your dwelling, your contents, and then whatever else third category. It could be your additional living expenses. It could just be, if you have, if you want to use that for your construction project, it's got that third section. It has a business card holder for you to keep track of folks that give you their cards that you actually think you might want to follow up with. Okay, again, that's just a snapshot of our homepage of our website. We have a special campfire library where we're putting things that are specific to that fire. Again, the fine print. We don't sell insurance. We don't accept money from insurance companies. You can't hire us to be your free lawyer or your anything. We are here as a source of information and guidance. And the information we're giving you tonight is not intended to be legal advice, just guidance. And then we do have, a find help directory on our website where you can find businesses that support us. And that is a place to go there. Okay, so a very important point that we always want to drive home is that knowledge equals power and money, right? In this context, the more you understand about your insurance benefits, your rights, and the value of your losses, the more benefits you're going to collect, and the smoother the process will go for you. And again, this is a very important point. When people ask me, what do you think is the most important thing that a disaster survivor can get from you and a policyholders? I'll say, well, honestly, I think it's that an insurance claim is really, you should look at it like a business negotiation more than anything else. And I think that's very hard for people because, you've had your whole life of looking at ads that give you the impression that your insurance company is, your friend and is going to be there for you, and they're going to make everything okay and everything, and those are ads, and the problem with that mindset of thinking, well, I'm just going to sit back and my insurance company is going to take care of everything for me, is that is just not practical. That's not the way it works in real life. In real life, this is when you have had a large or total loss, there's a lot of money at stake, and insurance companies are for-profit corporations. A lot of them are publicly traded, which means they have shareholders. So they are not in the business of giving away money they don't have to give away. And so while we don't want you to think of it as an adversarial relationship from the get-go, we want you to have a practical understanding that the person who has the most stake in getting your losses valued fairly and fully is you. It's your stuff, right? So you want to really, you want to understand that you don't want to be in a passive role, even though it is overwhelming. And of course, adjusters often speak a foreign language, and it is very easy to be intimidated. And I'm here to tell you that there's no reason to be intimidated when you're dealing with your insurance company, because you live in California, and California has very strong consumer protection laws. So even though things may not always go the way in fact, sometimes adjusters don't know the laws, but and sometimes you may feel like you're not in the driver's seat. I think that's one of the most difficult parts of this process is that loss of control. But I just want to repeat to you that you bought an insurance policy. It's a contract. It gives you rights, and the law gives you rights. So when things are not going the way you feel that they should be, you have places to turn. Joel's agency is one of them. So we say, the other adjusters vary in personality and experience, right? And when I say you think of it as a business transaction, it's also because it's never as black and white as the ads on TV would say, or it's never even as black and white as an adjuster may say to you. Because for example, if you talk to, let me go to the next slide. When we say stay connected to other fire survivors, they're a great source of information about insurance, rebuilding, financial strategies, an important source of emotional support, but also if your neighbor is insured with the same company as you are, but they have a different adjuster than the one that's handling your claim, they may be getting a different story about things that you can claim than you are. And that's because adjusters vary in their experience and their personalities. And even though, your insurance company would like to have everything be consistent and have everybody, get treated the same way, that's just not how it works in real life. This process is just like real life in that the squeaky wheel gets paid, and the person who has the better documentation is gonna get a better outcome. So again, I wish I could tell you that it's a clean, clear process, but it really, a lot of it comes down to the how clear you are about how much you have lost and the value of your losses, and then understanding what you're entitled to under your insurance policy. Those are kind of two of the most important objectives. So we talked about the journal claim diary, that it's a written record of your communications, not just with your insurance adjuster and the insurance and their higher ups, but also with contractors or people from the county or that sort of thing. You're going to document progress, you're going to document problems, things that are open items. You're going to document promises and agreements, who made it, when, and what was agreed to. Because as we talked about the first time we met, those of you who were here, I asked for a showing of hands, how many people were having trouble sleeping. Almost every hand in the room went up. So you're not at your peak mental capacity in this situation, and that's why, keeping track of things in writing can really, really help. So you don't have to rely as much on your memory. Okay, next slide. So this is just a saying, recovering from a disaster is a marathon, not a sprint. And that's, I kind of have mixed feelings about saying it because it sounds like, somebody like me, like I would never run a marathon if I had a choice. But the point really, again, is, you run into people in the supermarket that didn't lose a home and they'll say, oh, how are you coming along in the rebuilding, at month 3, and you're like, oh. Okay, so this is a long haul situation, which means that you're, just keep giving yourself that reassurance that, okay, I'm gonna move on this decision. I'm not gonna make this decision right away, and that's fine. Okay, and then another little saying, give your insurance company a chance to do the right thing, but don't be a pushover. And that's another, the next one. When interacting with the insurance company, we recommend that your demeanor be polite assertiveness. So again, it's like, okay, you get more flies with honey, the sayings, try to have a good rapport with your insurance adjusters if you can. That doesn't mean that, you just let them, push you around if you feel like they're telling you something that doesn't sound right, or if you read your policy and it says something different from what they're saying. That doesn't mean you have to just say, okay, so polite service. Try not to rush and talk about this, and one of the reasons is because tallying up a total loss takes a long time if you're going to be accurate. If you're going to count and take into account every single feature of a house and every single thing you lost, it takes time. And even though insurance companies have devised time-saving techniques, like, for example, the Exactware, the software that a lot of insurers now use to generate the dwelling estimates. So the idea there was, let's save time and let's automate this thing. the reality is that you still have to go in there and make sure that this estimate reflects what was in your house and it isn't just garbage in, garbage out from a computer. Okay, so we talked a little bit about debris removal. Now we're gonna talk just very briefly about how you figure out what coverage you have in your policy. Briefly, debris removal, typically, most policies are gonna give you, they won't give you a flat dollar amount. It won't say like 35,000. It'll say 10 or 15% of your coverage A, your dwelling. But it varies. So again, your goal is to figure out what your policy gives you for that. Participating in the coordinated debris removal does make sense for the majority of people. And that is because in a situation like this, where it's so large scale and it's, boggles the mind, that it is hard to get the debris removed for the amount of most people's coverage, which means that since the state is willing to pick up the balance of the tab, it does pencil out for most people. But I do know it's not an easy decision for a lot of people. Again, get the facts, not the rumors. Okay, next one. So I'm going to recap how we've broken down the process of your dwelling plan. Do you want to?
Well,
We typically try to keep questions to the end, but if it's a quickie.
no, it was just the.
That I skipped the thing about recompacting the
Yes,
soil.
I
I didn't mean to. It says soil recompacting and stabilization is extra important and often overlooked. That is really in terms of like the quality of the company. If you don't go with the state program and you go and you hire somebody on your own, you really want to make sure that they don't just take all the debris out, but that they also recompact the soil and stabilize it so that it can be ready to be rebuilt on. That was the point.
Does that not need to be done if you're not rebuilding?
I'm gonna leave that one for the county. I think, and of course I should kind of leave that one. I mean, it depends on the conditions of your property. Obviously, you just never want to have dangerous conditions on your property, especially if you're not there. And, I think it's probably not as important if you're not going to rebuild, but you just want to make sure there's no like gaping hole that somebody can fall in. Okay, so the process of navigating the dwelling part of your insurance claim, that's what we're focusing on today. The first workshop we did sort of a basic orientation. I kind of recapped a lot of that just now. But tonight, we want to go right to, okay, so your house is gone, and now you've got to figure out, okay, what would it take to put it back? How much would it cost to put that house back the way it was in compliance with the current building codes? And I say that, and I know like probably 80% of you are thinking, well, I'm not going to put that house back the way it was. Understood. But the reality is that the insurance contract is pegged to that cost. What the insurance company owes you is not the house you want to put back, the bigger, smaller, different, but the one that you have, even though you have no intention maybe of recreating it exactly, and maybe you couldn't, but still, getting to that number is the key to reaching a good settlement with your insurance company. So we're going to be talking about that process, okay? So there's 3 steps to it. Calculating the maximum dwelling coverage that's available to you in your policy, okay? Doing the math, we're going to walk through that in a minute. Understanding if your insurance company has made you an offer or they have said, how many of you have already gotten a check for your dwelling? Okay, a lot. So for a lot of people, how many of you got a check for what you think is the maximum amount available in your policy? Okay, so very often, and especially now that a lot of your companies, say farmers, for example, this is what they have a lot of losses up here. They have a lot of losses in Sonoma, a lot of total losses. They've had a lot of practice lately. And so it doesn't surprise me that more people are getting some early offers, not just from farmers, but from other companies. it might be the maximum you're entitled to, or it might not be, it might just be a starting point. But first of course, you wanna know what the maximum amount of coverage available to you is. And then the second piece is you wanna understand your insurer's offer. If they did give you that check, is that the right amount? Is that what you're entitled to? Okay, if it's less than your maximum policy limits, it could be a starting point. But regardless, it's important to know the true as-was value of the house that was insured, okay? And many people find that paying for an independent scope, we call it, and Sandy's gonna explain a little bit more about that later, is worth it. It's a tough one for a lot of people because you think, well, I paid for coverage and I paid for good claim service and my insurance company knows their stuff and they came up with this calculation. Why do I have to pay somebody for a second opinion? And the answer is to make sure that you're getting every dollar that you're entitled to. That's the answer. Now, not everybody needs to do it, but that is something that a lot of people find it is worth it for them, is getting a second opinion on what it would cost to put the house back. Okay. And then the third part is if there's a dispute, if you feel that your insurer owes you X and they're offering you Y, then you want to obviously settle that dispute and break that logjam. Okay, so those are the steps. So coverage A, your dwelling coverage, we call that the big ticket item in your policy. And then you have to do the math to know your limits. Why? Because there's that number on what's called the declarations page. That's generally the first, second, or third page of the policy that has your address and then the name of your mortgage company, and then it'll have boxes and numbers. There'll be dollar amounts there, but they are, in most cases, they're going to be adjustable by an inflation formula in the policy. And then also, do you have what's called extended replacement? And then the word endorsement or rider in insurance kind of means the same thing. Generally, it's an add-on. It's a additional language that either changes the basic contract in some way, and it usually adds coverage. Sometimes it takes it away. So the way that you know whether you have riders and endorsements is by looking at that declarations page. Okay, so here's an example where you have this is a nice neat policy that would be divided into the 4 sections. A, dwelling. B, other structures. That's your garage and outbuilding, retaining wall, personal property, loss of use. Those are the typical 4 categories, or we call them sometimes buckets. So your stated limit, that would be that 300,000 number in that example. And then these are some resources to help you if you are having trouble. There's a handout that you could have picked up on the way in that had the color coded. That's another tool to help you read your policy. Okay, next line. Okay, so here's a it's going to be very hard for you guys to see the teeny tiny numbers on there, but basically you see those 4 boxes up top. Okay, and then you see endorsements. So in this example, you see this person has a limited home replacement endorsement, 150% of coverage A. That means that their basic limit got increased. Okay, and then this person also had a replacement value endorsement on their personal property, on their stuff. That just means that that person's policy allow them to collect replacement value, not just actual cash value or depreciated. Okay, so those are 2 ways that their coverage got increased by their endorsements. Okay, next slide. And again, this is the same page. We're just highlighting that limited home replacement cost endorsement, and then there's another add-on in this policy. At the bottom, it says building code upgrade limit 75,000. That's an example of additional coverage that this person had in their policy. Very important, actually, coverage, because usually that is, building code upgrade is, let's say your house was built in 1960, now, 2019, in theory, we're smarter about what makes people safer in their homes, so now we have new rules about, you can't have knob and tube wiring and that kind of thing. So in order to rebuild a house that was built in 1960, you've got to make it better, you've got to upgrade it, and therefore this policy gives that person some money to pay for upgrade, 75,000. Okay. So this is just another way of helping you understand it. So here, we've got an example. Let's say this person has $100,000 in dwelling coverage, not 300 like the old example, and it was extended okay, let's just go. Okay, there it is at the top. So this person had a 25% extended replacement cost, so that gave them an extra 25,000. We're just trying to use easy math here. 100,000, a 25% gave them another 25,000. Then those little circles are the different other coverages that they had. Trees and shrubs. Again, a lot of policies will peg the smaller buckets of coverage to coverage A, to the dwelling coverage, right? So this policy, this person had 5% of their A for trees and shrubs, etc. Okay, we can go to the next one. We talked about this. So extended, most policies sold today have this extension in it, and it's largely because after every disaster, so many people find themselves underinsured. So it has been more and more common for the insurers to sell, or for agents to sell people these extra extensions to give them a little bit more protection. Very few policies will apply that increase to your other buckets, to your contents, but you want to read the policy carefully to see if maybe there's an argument that the extension does give you a bump on those other ones. Sometimes it can. Mobile and manufactured homes generally have the same 4 buckets of coverage, but typically they have lower limits in all the categories, and the valuation, depreciation is the big fight often with mobile homes, manufactured homes, because they're considered to lose their value quicker than a stick-built home. Okay, so scoping and proving the value of your loss. I'm going to turn over the microphone to Sandy Watts. Sandy is on the United Policyholders team. She spent several decades of her professional life as a claim adjuster with State Farm and then with CIG. She ran a Serpro company doing water damage repairs and is very knowledgeable, and we're so grateful to have her with us today. So Sandy, take over.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about proving the value of your loss. So in 99% of the cases, it's going to fall onto you to prove the value of your house back to your insurance company. Some of this fire is really different than some others. We've seen a lot more companies doing just paying the total limits. I don't know, did some of you raise your hand if you received your full limits? So people who receive their full dwelling limits might not necessarily need to do this. You might need to do it if you need to file a loss with your income tax. There's different reasons like that, or if you're going to maybe join a PG&E lawsuit, something along those lines, you're going to need the whole value. So what we suggest is that you really need to get some sort of professional help, either paid or unpaid, to help you document your loss. So have any of you seen an estimate from your insurer yet? Okay, just a couple of you. Okay, that's kind of surprising. By now they should have given you, most people should pretty much have some sort of valuation from their insurance company that is at least the basis for their initial payment, okay? So companies use different methods of giving the first payment. Some of them I've heard are using appraisals, which is sort of the fair market value of your property, and basing their initial payments on that. A lot of companies use a software program called Xactimate. Have you guys heard of that? Okay, so Xactimate is a tool. It's not widely used by people in the construction industry. It's an insurance industry tool. Some contractors use it only because they're contractors who do a lot of insurance work, and it makes it much easier to get the money if you're sort of a comparison issue. So what the key to this is, so there's a breakdown. There's a difference between a scope and an estimate. And so for me, this is one of the most important things that you can kind of get. Because if you deal with them separately, you'll find that doing this is a little easier. A scope is basically an itemized, super detailed breakdown of the building that you lost, okay? So it talks about everything. It talks, foundation, flooring, wall coverings, roof, the whole thing. And it's super itemized, and it is simply, without the money part of it, it's simply a list of all the things that make up the building that you lost. One of the things that we hear a lot is, somebody gets this estimate, and sometimes they're 80 pages long. They're this thick from their insurance company. They turn to the back page, because that's, the end of the book, and they freak out because it's a big discrepancy between the policy limit and what's on this estimate. So I always say to people, let's not worry about the dollar amount until you know that what made up the dollar amount is actually reflective of what you lost. It's a super tedious process, and unfortunately, the best person to do it is you, because you know best what you lost. So what we tell people is to go take that estimate and break it down bit by bit and see, are there items missing? Let's not talk about the pricing yet. And let's not talk about depreciation yet, but let's talk about things like measurements. We've been working for the last year in Santa Rosa on the Tubbs fire, and I would talk to people and they missed whole rooms. They missed whole rooms. If any of you have a house that has higher than 8-foot ceilings, look at that first, because the default on the program is 8 feet, and some adjusters forget to, if you have a 10-foot ceiling, adjusters forget to put that in there, and it makes a huge difference because 2x4s come in 8-foot lengths. So it's really important to, if you have plans, to go through your plans, make sure that the rooms that they put on their estimate are the same size, and then you got to go room by room. And don't worry too much about things like foundation and roofing and things like that. That can be kind of like a subcontractor can work on that. But for your inside of your house, look at, hopefully they've estimated in some sort of logical manner. I used to train adjusters to do it. So we'd say, doesn't matter if you start from the ceiling and work down or the floor and work up, but try to do it in order, so I always was from the floor up. And so think about what kind of floor covering did you have, start in the entry hall, what was on the floor, how big were the baseboards, what kind of wall texture did you have, how many outlets, how many light switches, what kind of front door, how high was the ceiling, were there skylights, windows, and you have to double check every single one of those items. And then make a copy, mark it up in red ink, and you send it back to your adjuster and say, there's a whole bunch of mistakes on the estimate with the scope, fix them. And so a lot of times that fixing of the scope brings the price a lot closer together. So it brings it much closer to where you need to be once you're making, so you can't even talk about price if you're not talking about the same house. Okay, and it's really important because what they owe you is that house that you lost, that exact house, plus the code upgrades, okay? So it's super, super important and in your best interest to get that scope exactly right. If you have to send it back 10 times, keep doing it until it's the house that you lost, and then once that's done, then you can go in and say, where are our differences? Where are we looking at here? Oops, go back one more. Sorry. Yeah, okay, so this is a good one. So these are ways to do it, photos, public records, home docs, all of that. Sometimes ask your neighbors, ask your family, I try to have them remember things, just to try to get and document, try to recall what you had. Try to think about if you were gonna plug in something in that room, where was it, how many options did you have in that room? Because those things, they add up. So those are all things that are helpful. Go back. Okay, no, that's what we already talked about, go ahead. Also, well, there's one in the middle here, the scope of loss. So the other thing you need to do, a lot of times this exact estimate, it defaults to certain, it has a very limited, depth of building materials. So say, for instance, a kitchen counter. So think about the variations of kitchen counter. You can go from an old sort of, the linoleum ones that have the metal edge back in, and then you can go all the way up to, quartz and all the nice granites and things like that. Exactimate tends to just have Formica, granite, nice granite. It doesn't really get all the way across. So if you have something that was a little different, a little specialty, then you need to account for that, and you need to tell them about it, because it's likely not in their default price list. So that's very important. Okay, keep going. Okay, yeah, sizes and shapes. So this is, we all did this. Google Earth is also kind of helpful. So yeah, just make sure that you're reflecting it correctly. So this is key. So this is what's, a lot of you are going to encounter this. You're going to get a contractor. They're going to get this multiple page bid, and they're going to be like, yeah, I can't do that. Because in the real world, contractors don't use Exactimate. They don't do it piece by piece and outlet by outlet. They kind of group it together. So what we suggest is make sure that your adjuster gives you, it's called a trade summary or trade breakdown. Okay, super important. They don't always send it. They don't always send it, but you need to ask them for a trade breakdown that's divided by coverage A and coverage B. Sometimes they combine it. You don't want it combined because you want to deal with your house and your garage kind of separately, so you can compare them. So if they don't send you a trade breakdown, it's simply a push of a button. It's a check mark in the computer program that allows them to produce that. Have them send it to you, and then have your contractor, when they do their bid, and the trade breakdown is like concrete, rough framing, finished carpet, floor coverings, windows, doors. It's large. These big ticket items. And it's really familiar for the contractors to do it that way. They'll get an electrical sub bid, they'll get a plumbing bid, they'll get a concrete bid. So that's a better way. And then so when you get your contractor's bid and then you compare it to your adjuster's bid, you're going to be kind of in the same ballpark. And at least you can look. Some are going to be higher, some are going to be lower, but you can identify really quickly if there's a big discrepancy in one area. And literally we find that a lot of times, is that you don't necessarily have to deal with the prices in the whole estimate, but if there's a big discrepancy, you want to hit there. And then let the others, this will be a little under, this will be a little over, let those be okay, and just hit on the big ticket items. So it's really important. This unit pricing, so Exactware, the program, what it does is it takes every single component of, say, 1 square foot of flooring, okay, and it rolls it all in, it puts it all together. Whereas a contractor will say, okay, well, I have to do all this flooring, and then I do all this, and there's a lot of layers to it. And Xactimate rolls it all in, so there's like labor and materials and, you know, all sorts of different things rolled into their unit pricing. So it's hard to, if you say, okay, I have a discrepancy in, you know, floor coverings, it's a little bit harder to compare it, because if you look at what they're doing and what your contractor's doing, they don't quite come up with it in the same way. So it's, again, good to look at the overall picture for the overall project in each trade. Does that make sense? So this is just an example of what a page of Xactimate pricing looks like. And what you want to do is just go through this. This one has, you know, paneling, masonite paneling with paint over the top of it. It talks about how many outlets, how many switches, how many cable. Yeah, don't forget your cable outlets. I mean, all these little things. Things like baseboard. Baseboard defaults to half-inch baseboard in Xactimate. So make sure, if you have like a big baseboard or something like that, make sure that see how this one says 4 1/4 inch hardwood. So make sure that it has what you have, because there's a huge price difference. So this is just an example. You know, I tell people just bite it off in pieces, do a little bit at a time, do, you know, 1 room a day, you know, something like that, and just, you know, keep chipping away at it just until it's right. Yeah, so this is kind of what we talked about before, the gap. You want to try to get your contractor's estimate and the insurance company estimate, something so they're kind of comparable, so you can look and identify where the gap is. Okay? And if you get down to something, there's a discrepancy, that's when you start looking at individual prices. And a lot of times doing things like getting a sub bid, so maybe you don't need to get a whole other, because some people say, oh, do I need to get, you know, 3 contractors bids? Well, in the perfect world, 3 contractors bids would be great, but I know you guys are all probably struggling to get 1, right? I mean, it's very hard to find people at this time. So sometimes if it's just one area of the estimate, you can get like a specialty, somebody to give you a smaller sub bid for that. Okay? So then the estimate, the difference between the scope of loss, I mean, is that it's super detailed, you know, it's the punch list. And then the estimate is more how much money is involved in each thing, okay? So the more you have to support your position to the insurance company, the better chances you are of collecting it. So a lot of people, you know, they just have a contract that says, well, I can do this for, you know, $400,000. That contractor who says, you know, remove and replace 1 house, $400,000, that estimate, and we've seen it before, is not going to get as far as somebody who's taken the time to do at least a trade breakdown. So the better documented you have it, the more your chances to collecting what you're owed. Okay? And it also lets them compare costs, because one of the things that happens in situations like this is that prices change. So there is an inflation, you know, there's a supply and demand factor going on here, and it's harder to get building materials. It's, you know, there was a problem after the Sonoma County fires hit, and now the problem's exponential. So there's price differences that really they haven't been able to keep up with Xactware. And so that's something that you might have to educate them on, and it's perfectly acceptable to do that. So, you know, Amy talked about it a little. It seems kind of unfair that you have to go and get a second estimate, even though you paid your insurance company to pay you for your loss. Unfortunately, it's going to end up in 99% of the cases paying for itself in a way. You know, if you do it, you'll get more money out of the situation. There's people, contractors will do it. Some contractors will do it for free. Fewer and fewer are doing it for free now because, you know, there's so much work to be had. They don't really have the time. And it used to be that contractors, you know, if your house is in the middle of a town and it burns down and you're the only house, all the contractors in town will come over and, you know, say, ooh, use me, you know, here's my bid, and, you know, they'd sort of sort of, woo you a little bit to try to get your business. Well, it's kind of the other way around now, unfortunately. So some people are charging. There's companies that all they do are write scopes for insurance claims. And they charge varying amounts of money. Some of them, $4,000 or $5,000 up to, way up to a percentage of that. I heard one guy was charging like 4% of the rebuild cost, which to me is a lot. Architects can do it too. But the goal is, if you're gonna pay somebody to do it, okay, make sure that the product they give you at the end is something that you can use, that the insurance company can use, and you can use it as a negotiating tool. You don't want to get stuck, with buying something and then having it not be helpful. Yeah, and we talked about this a little bit. Not all of the insurance companies will prepare a scope. I've seen it more than I used to see it. And the deal is they really should be. They have an obligation, the insurance companies have an obligation to reasonably investigate your claim and within a reasonable period of time evaluate it and pay you what they think they owe you. So if they don't give you a breakdown, you're entitled to know, what did you base this payment on? Some of them based it on an appraisal, in which case, ask them if they're going to provide you with a full replacement cost estimate, because technically they really should. Because appraisals only really deal with, the market value of something, and depending on the market in your area, it doesn't necessarily bear any relation to the costs it costs to rebuild. So if you have a replacement cost policy, then you really need to have a rebuild estimate. So, okay, your goal is to fully document your loss so that you can settle your claim. Okay, next one. And then I'm going to give this back to Amy for underinsurance. I'm sure that's probably an issue.
Okay, so how many of you have an inkling that your insurance is not going to be enough to cover the cost of putting your house back?
Isn't that everybody?
It's not quite everybody, believe it or not. According to the surveys that we do after disasters, and we're going to be asking y'all to do one at the 6-month mark, it's been about 66%, 2/3. But a lot of people will say down the road after they've settled, they'll say, you know what, I was underinsured and I didn't realize it. So yeah, it's a full-on crisis. It's a big deal because it's such a common problem, and it's meaning if you don't have enough coverage to replace your home, which typically is where people are underinsured. Typically, people have enough coverage for their stuff, for their contents, their personal property, but typically people come up short on their dwelling, and that often means that they're also underinsured on those coverages that get calculated as a percentage of the dwelling. So they may be underinsured then on their other structures, or their debris removal, or their trees, shrubs, and landscaping. And it's such a big problem that our organization has a whole section of our library dedicated to giving you suggestions, ideas, information, resources to try to either, if there is somebody who is at fault for the fact that you're underinsured, so for example, you're the agent or the broker, if they very, very strongly told you this is enough, you've got enough, and you have some way to prove that they said that to you, that's one way of getting your insurance company to pay more than the contract obligates them to pay. Another avenue that people who are underinsured can pursue is litigation, as a lawsuit. There are already a number of lawsuits that are pending for people who lost their homes in the 2017 Sonoma and Napa fires, Tubbs, Atlas, etc. And those lawsuits are just kind of beginning. I will tell you in the past, these types of lawsuits have not, certainly not been publicly successful. You will hear about a lot of people who reach confidential settlements with their insurance companies where the insurance company did pay over their limits, but most people will have a very hard time getting their insurance company to pay over the limits on their own. And even when you hire a lawyer, it's, it's kind of a crapshoot because it depends on how good your lawyer is, what kind of judge, what that judge's political leanings might be, what's in the newspaper. But the main way that a lot of people deal with being underinsured is they either build a smaller house or they negotiate with their insurance company to let them take some of their contents money and apply that towards the dwelling. There's actually legislation that got through last session that lets people do it. It's not in effect yet for your fire, but it's still an argument you can make. You can ask, again, if you're not asking the insurance company to pay more than the contract says, you just want them to let you move buckets of money around, very often they'll do it. They may ask you, to sign a confidentiality agreement, don't tell your neighbors, but very often they won't. And again, these are some of those strategies that sharing information with your neighbors, can really help you with. Because if you find out that a neighbor, got their insurance company to give them a break on something, said, okay, now you don't have to, itemize everything, and then you can say to your adjuster, well, hey, you gotta treat me the same as that guy. And they do legally have to treat all their insurance the same. So, and then the other way that people deal with being underinsured is they can take out an SBA loan. And I forgot to tell you, we were asked by the FEMA SBA, the local representative, to remind you that please register for a FEMA number. Even if you think, oh, I won't qualify for the aid, or I'm never gonna need an SBA loan, it still registered. So, and the deadline is January 31st. So, again, it's free. It's just a matter of getting this FEMA number, and then if you decide you want to apply for a low interest SBA loan, then you can. Okay, but once that deadline passes, it gets a lot harder. So January 31st. Okay. The other issue that you may encounter is what people sometimes refer to as lowballing, where the insurance company says this house can be rebuilt for $400,000. I'm sorry, that's a bad example. Let's say $200,000. The insurance company says this house can be put back for $200,000. The contractor that you that you have found says no way. This is at least $400,000, that kind of thing. That if your insurance company is digging in their heels, even after you've given them very good documentation and proof, that they may be lowballing you, meaning they may be intentionally trying to pay less than they owe. How do you counteract that? Just as we were talking about earlier, get and present to your insurance company good documentation of the thorough, carefully added up components of the house as it was and putting everything back from reputable local builders. Another way to counteract lowballing, consider hiring your own expert. We talked about that, to create an independent scope of loss. And then the third is set up a face-to-face meeting between a contractor that you trust and your insurance adjuster to reconcile pricing and scope differences. And I tell you, those face-to-face meetings, like those of us who were around long before emailing and texting, old school communications can be very powerful when you're in the same room with this adjuster and they have to answer questions from a construction professional and say, how could you put this, this person doesn't describe their house at all. So having that face-to-face meeting can be extremely helpful. So what are the guiding principles to sort of recap what we covered tonight? Focus on documenting the full extent and value of your losses. Aim for at least 2 real estimates if you can get them. Give your adjuster a chance to do the right thing, but don't be a pushover. Trust but verify, apply leverage and negotiate. And then anytime the adjuster tells you, or the insurance company representative tells you, that something that doesn't sound right to you, you ask them, show me where it says in the policy, show me where it says that, all right? Show me where it says that you can depreciate my stuff across the board 50%, because of course they can't. Those are sort of guiding principles. And I want to remind you, we've got Joel Loucher here with the Department of Insurance, and he's going to be able to answer your questions and talk to you about the process that they have for filing a complaint with the Department of Insurance. But not only are there a lot of regulations and laws in California that no other state has, so there are adjusters, there's a very good chance that some of the adjusters that you're working with don't even know what the rules are here. For example, that you're allowed to replace your home by buying one instead of rebuilding, and you can still get your max. Or for example, that y'all have at least 24 full months of additional living expense up to your policy limits, and you can get a third year if you need it. And no other state gives you that right, 36 months max. Same thing with collecting the full replacement value on your stuff. You have up to 3 years in California to get full value. And there's no allowable across the board depreciation in this state, because the law in California is, and depreciation, just to recap, because it's a big deal, is the reduction in value of an item to account for its condition and its age, right? Wear and tear, right? So, the perfect example of depreciation, the easy one to remember, is you take a couch and that you had in your living room and you had it in your family room. In the living room, you never let anyone eat on the couch or drink on the couch. In the family room, it's a full-on feast, every night on the couch. So same couch bought at the same time, the one in the family room is going to be worth less. It's going to depreciate more than the one in the living room. And that's why the law in California is condition matters. So when adjusters try to shortcut and say, okay, we're just going to depreciate everything across the board, we don't allow that in California. That's not legal. Okay, that means that's where you can push back. And one of the other laws we have in California that no other state has, and I know this because my organization helped write the law and pass it, is that you don't need to hire a lawyer to get access to your claim file. Okay? If you want to see your file on how the adjuster has been processing your claim and what kind of reports that they have, you have the right in California to ask for it and to get copies of your claim file documents. So I want you to have a great relationship with your adjusters if you can, and you typically will have a series of them that will rotate through. That's just normal after a catastrophe. They'll bring in typically adjusters that are typically from out of state, and they'll stay for a while, and then they need to go home. I want you to have great relations with them, but I do not, as we said, I don't want you to be a pushover, because even though they may talk in language that's not familiar to you sometimes, they've got to follow the law in this state. Okay, and we're here to tell you a lot about what the laws are. Our goal is to make sure that you get what you're entitled to. That's because we are consumer advocates. We are here to help you get a fair shake. Okay, there's one more piece I'm gonna cover, and then we're gonna go into Q&A. This is just a recap of stuff that's in our library. Okay, so we can go on. Okay, so like I said, you all have the right to replace your home by buying one instead of rebuilding, and you can still collect your full replacement value, your extended coverage, your building code upgrade coverage, and again, out-of-state adjusters often don't know that. If you want to buy a replacement home, again, though, you still need to establish what it would have cost to rebuild your house as it was in compliance with the laws to understand what is the dollar amount that the insurance company owes you that then you would have to spend to buy a house. So it's, no matter what, you still have to get to that number that we've been talking about all evening. And so, because generally that's what the insurer owes you. Okay, next. Okay, we talked about that, okay. You want to present your insurer, it's fine. Was that? No, it's okay. I don't want to go too much into this, but just know that we have a very good publication in our library, Buy or Rebuild. You just enter in the search box at uphelp.org, Buy or Rebuild. It'll bring it up. It tells you what your rights are. It tells you what some of the soft spots are in the process. But basically, you're going to present your insurer with one or more estimates as if you were going to put that house back the way it was, stick for stick. And then you're going to reach an agreement with them on that. And then you're gonna look for the house that is in that ballpark of price. Okay. We already covered that. Will you be able to get your full replacement benefits if you buy instead of rebuild? Yes, we can move on. That law has been clarified now by the legislature. But you have to spend it. So people often say, can I buy a cheaper house and pocket the difference? No. Can I buy a more expensive house and pay the difference myself? Yes. Okay. Going in summary, paper trail is very important. Learn to earn, know everything that we've been trying to feed you tonight, if you can digest it. Can you show me where it says that in the policy if something doesn't sound right to you? Only you knew the condition of your property, so if you know that things were in good condition and the adjuster is just trying to depreciate on the basis of their age, you can push back. We have a whole section of sample letters to help you communicate effectively with your insurance company. And then you can get help from the California Department of Insurance and or claim health professionals. I don't know if they're still here. There were a couple of public adjusters that popped in. Have any of you been to a seminar hosted by a public adjuster? Okay, so again, there are, if you're the kind of person who is just feeling like this is way too much for you, you cannot deal with this, if you have to sit through another meeting and listen to this kind of stuff, you just can't take it. That's what a public adjuster is for, is to take it all off of you. But the thing that is so important to know about that profession, just like anyone, that the quality of them varies, and it is so important to talk to some past clients before you hire one, and also know that their fees are negotiable, okay? So I'm gonna turn the mic over to my friend Joel Boucher. Joel, thank you so much for making the trip up here. Joel, I never had faith to restore, I've always had faith in government, but if you're one of those people who doesn't, this gentleman should give you faith. He's has been working with the Department of Insurance for many years. He was in their rate regulation bureau, figuring out whether the rates they were charging were fair. He's here just as a good citizen as well as a professional. So thank you so much, Joel.
Thank you for those kind words, Amy. I'm really just here to, again, tout the Department of Insurance for you as a resource. I'm sorry that any of you have to be here tonight, the circumstances that brought you together here. Nobody wants to spend a Wednesday night talking about insurance or any other night. I know that as an insurance person, but insurance gives you a path forward out of the position you're in. And I understand that it's also a vexing path, right? You are dealing with all the things that Sandy and Amy just talked about, and it's complicated. And it is fantastic that these people are here tonight to help you with this. United Policyholders does a great job, and I know they get their funding from grants and donations. Hopefully you'll keep them in mind yourselves. For them to be up here in Chico is fantastic, and they are a great resource. There wasn't a thing that they said that I would disagree with in terms of the details, technical details. And so, these are we would say the same things to you from the Department of Insurance. I want you to know that you do have the Department of Insurance as another resource. Our staff is generally located in Los Angeles, but they are available by phone. So you can call our 800 number, 800-927-4357, or you can go online. Like United policyholders, we have a lot of information about claims handling and what you need to do. But we also have former claims adjusters ourselves, like Sandy is herself. We have former claims adjusters that can help you as well. You can file documents online. You don't have to put them through the mail. And we also have a mediation program that can help you. It's not for underinsurance, but it is in place for other property disputes. So again, an important part of the messaging up there that you see is free. So we are there for you. So it can't hurt to use this resource. It's personal assistance. So somebody will work with you directly with your questions. If you don't like the answer you get, you can call back and see if you get a different answer. But you know, it's just like anything else that Amy's talking about. Everybody has a little different view on things, and it really, she used some terms, I would say patience and perseverance. And actually one of the things I know Amy has mentioned before is for you to deal with bite-sized pieces of this issue, but also to feed your adjuster bite-sized pieces, not an email, but I have 50 problems I need you to address right away. But it is 3 things I need to know right away. And when you get that back, then the next 3 kind of thing, and try to work with them. I agree with everything they said about the insurance folks a lot of them are super people, but like anybody else on a job, they're trying to get a lot of things just done and closed. And you don't want this to just be done and closed. You want to make sure that you have utilized the full value of your contract. But in doing so, you want to be reasonable too, right? It isn't necessarily so that just because you had a $250,000 limit on your contents, you don't feel obligated to try and find a way to claim every one of those dollars. You don't necessarily have that much in a certain situation, right? So it isn't about trying to make things where you don't have it, but get everything for what you do have. And you're entitled to that by the contract. Some of the best words they mention, is show me where that is in the contract. We would look at the contract ourselves at the department when we help you. So again, avail yourself of this free resource, and that's what we're there for, and we're happy to help you.
Okay, so we have 2 microphones. Let's see. I'll tell you what. You want to do it? Oh,
I need the extra second. So I know this is the toughest part of my job, but we're going to get to everyone, and I'll just kind of go through the room.
testing.
You ready?
Okay. Yeah, we're ready with our little extremely live anyway.
I just want to clarify, I think you said that the garage and the house are separate.
Is that true? You know what, I don't think we need.
If they're detached, so most of the policies say that coverage A is your primary dwelling, and that the other structures are other structures separated from the house by clear space.
So a deck would be considered on the house?
So this is one example of where you have to read your policy, because some of the companies say that structures attached to the house are part of coverage A, and then some of them say that they're other structures. So you really have to look. They've mushed their language around in the last few years from where it used to be, and so you have to actually look and read the definition. You'll have things that say like coverage A, and it'll say we insure the house used as a primary residence, whatever, and then it'll say, other structures, we insure other structures. Some of them say we only cover ones with roofs, and there's a lot of variation.
And I want to say a lot of people have found that you can argue for it the way you want it to be. So in other words, if you're underinsured on your dwelling, but you have enough on your other structures, you can say, can we put this in other structures? And if you have a nice adjuster, they will say yes.
There are a few situations where it's questionable, so they'll move it around.
It doesn't make sense to me because they say the square footage, it doesn't make sense to me because they say the square footage of the house, but that's not including the garage.
But your garage is attached to your house.
It is, but it's not the square footage of the house.
Yeah, don't get too hung up on square footage from your application, because a lot of people get hung up on this. They'll look at their application and say, well, and it could be an issue if you're talking about inadequate limits for underinsurance, but if you're dealing with actually the adjustment of the claim, people get hung up and it says, oh, well, it says my house was, 1,500 square feet, and really it was 1,800 square feet. It doesn't really matter, because what you're actually dealing with is the pot of the money, not the square footage.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get over here, then I'll go there and then hit the middle again to try to mix it up.
So I want to clarify what my insurance adjuster told me that I think is wrong. He told me, they gave us policy limits on A and B. They're paying that out now. He's telling me that if we rebuild, they'll go with the rebuild cost, but if we move somewhere else, that we will only get the estimate of what the property was worth before it was burned down, minus the land itself. And I don't think that's correct.
Oh, okay. So they're saying that they want to make a deduction for the value of the land under the house you want to buy?
And not be responsible for any of the upgraded rebuild costs. We have 200%.
Sure. Yeah, and we might have a different kind of view on this, but generally, and the new law reiterates that what you would get at the new location is everything it would take to rebuild your house at the current location based on your coverages. So if you have building code upgrade, and it would require that to rebuild the home you had, which typically it will, because you'll have to honor the new building codes, where you have extended replacement costs to get to the limit to rebuild that home. All of that, so let's say you had a $400,000 home, or limit, and then you'd have to apply that maybe 50% extra of extended replacement costs, another 10% for building code upgrade. You would get all of that dollars to buy at the new location. There is, in my mind, a dispute of whether if you took that exact pot of money, $500,000, and wanted to buy a $500,000 house, land included, whether they have to pay for the land at the new location. But I think by a lot of interpretations, and for a lot of companies' decisions, they would do that, because there's no windfall to you under that scenario. You're entitled to the $500,000, let's say, to rebuild your home where it is. So to buy something for $500,000 kind of just rationally seems okay. So that's.
So we have to get a contract.
I think the bottom line here is that's a soft spot, meaning the land, just the land. Everything else has been settled. They have to, if you're replacing your home by buying, they got to give you your standard replacement, your code upgrades. The one thing that the legislature didn't settle, the one thing that the courts have not settled is whether they can make a deduction for the land under the new house. And, look, I'm a consumer advocate, so I feel very strongly that they shouldn't be allowed to do that for a couple of reasons. In most policies, there's no deduction written into it. It doesn't say, and we won't pay for the land. So, we always say, I'm a lawyer, so I say, like, hey, if it ain't in the policy, you cannot, enforce it. But I think Sandy was just gonna.
Oh, well, I was gonna say, there's also an argument to say say you have $500,000 to spend, and you find a property for $500,000, but then the appraised value is like $400,000 for the house and $100,000 for the land. If they deduct the land, then there's an argument, you end up with a $400,000 house when really you have $500,000 to spend. So it's really like, it's a bad situation, because really in order to get whole to do that, you actually have to pay for the land out of your pocket. I mean, and their argument is, well, go sell your other piece of property that may or may not be worth anything. But so there's a lot of arguments, and really if you do that, then you're getting a house that's worth $100,000 less than what you're entitled to. Plus, they're not going to give you all of the $500,000 because you didn't spend it all.
Well,
So
then
it's-
arguably it's a windfall to the insurer.
Yeah.
Because they would have paid 500,000, now they're only paying 4 because you know.
So to recap, it's a fight, we'd like to see you take one, but we are very much mindful that no one in this group needs an extra fight. So it's kind of like, take it as far as you can.
We'll look to
and-
give that some clarity through our general counsel at the
And,
department.
and I, one of the ways that United Policyholders helps people is by connecting them with the very small number of lawyers in California that day in and day out specialize in suing insurance companies. Those are kind of our people. Not that we ever want to see anybody in litigation, we don't. But when you get into a situation where there's a lot of dollars on the top, at stake for you, let's say $100,000, value for the land, that is one of those situations where you may want to talk to a policyholder attorney, because we know a number of attorneys, because it's not settled, this issue about the land, we know some attorneys who are filing suits to challenge the insurance company's refusal. But again, it's a soft spot, and you may not even have the energy to fight it. We probably should go to the next question.
My insurance company has done an appraisal essentially on the phone in conversation with me and given me a copy of the market value of my property. And part of that was the designation of how much the land was worth versus the structure. And they've already given me half of the maximum replacement value of the dwelling, but with their calculations, they're using the appraised value of the structure minus the land as part of that, factoring that in. I'm hoping that's just the beginning point.
Just to start.
Okay. Is it?
Yeah, and then you just do all the things we talked about tonight to document what the rebuild cost is, because they have to.
On my insurance, for the dwelling was $375,000 say. And if I rebuild, they're giving me for the totes, the money for that. My insurance lady told me though, if you don't build, because I was going to relocate in my house, it's already done, you do not get that.
That's wrong.
That's wrong.
That's wrong. And up until the last legislative session, I would have said, oh, it's a fight, kind of like the land value, but it's not a fight anymore.
The other thing that they're saying is that you have to replace with exactly what you lost, like you have to find a house. You don't. You have to spend the money that, you have to agree on what they owe you, and you have to spend it if you want to get it all. Like if you want to get that they're holding back your code or whatever, but you do have to spend it. But I just talked to somebody in Santa Rosa, and she's like, yeah, they're saying you have to have the same square footage and the same, and you do not have to. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah, ranch house, you want to buy a GFD dome, you can do that as long as the price tag is the same.
How do you come up with a figure of how much totes would cost?
You have to get an estimate.
You got it, so, okay, I don't think we're there yet, obviously, in Paradise, with the building department and all the stuff having to be created, but like, at some point, the county will say, these are some of the codes that you're gonna have to factor in your legal, so it's really a matter of.
One obvious one.
Right, it's always sort of, the county wants everybody to be able to rebuild,
There's a lot of state.
but there are, it's not just, they don't, they can't override the state building code and that kind of thing. So I think, just fairly soon, I would imagine, you're.
It's next on the list, but Paradise had like a lot of buildings that were built from the 50s to the 80s. So clearly, something in the 50s isn't going to have the same current. Like I had like the old light bulb fuses in one of my rentals, so that's not going to work. It's going to be a 200 amp kind of thing, or vents that are fire safe versus older vents.
I mean, the bottom line is that somebody trustworthy in the building trades should have familiarity with the codes, because a lot of them are uniform building codes that, are across the nation, and things like that. The things that tend to be unique for your county will have to do with things like fire safety, and sprinklers, and maybe even environmental. I don't know if you have the same, Sonoma County has, a big, energy saving type ordinance. I don't know that, I don't think you guys have.
It's not that there is a time limit on when you have to file a lawsuit.
So there is, not anything you need to worry about now, I can guarantee that. It is typically, it would be with your insurance company, if you didn't like the way they were behaving, you would have a full year from the time that they closed the door finally and the claim says we're done, we're not paying you anymore, okay? If you're talking about a lawsuit against, say, PG&E, that's typically, you're always gonna wanna talk to a lawyer before the 1 year anniversary, if you think that you've got something that you want to take to court, but again, you're really far from that.
And just to clarify, the new legislation changed that 1 year to 2 years. So as of September, that's 24 months from the time they either make the final payment or deny your claim.
Right, so that's way out in the future, right, when that 2 years starts.
2 years doesn't start until they've either denied your claim or said, here's your last payment. The only time I would be really careful is any of you who are getting paid out all your limits, like if they're paying you coverage A, all your contents and everything, and they send you those checks and they say, here you go, here's your claim. If you want to come back and make a claim for your code and your extended replacement costs, send us the stuff. Be careful, because technically that payment starts your 2 years don't. So that's really the only time that's a little tricky. So
Is that from when you cash it or
when they tender it to you.
So they have to. And again, I can almost guarantee that we will be back here before the anniversary, like a month before the anniversary, with a workshop that is just gonna talk about your legal rights. Because even though you still don't need to worry at the 1 year, people do worry about it, and we will talk about it.
My question is a little different. About 10 days after the fire, our company promised that they had paid off a woman already the 2 days before, and that they would use every possible government source to identify the loss. They're using a public adjuster, so the hired gun says to me, it doesn't work that way. I told him as soon as he saw that house on the internet from CAL FIRE, that money should be in my account tonight. He said, it doesn't work that way. I think that they owe me legal interest for the 20 days it took to get there. Am I right?
I don't think I
So I think are you talking about knowing whether or not the house was gone? That there was, once you knew that it was gone, you thought that they should have put money in?
No, the company said
Which
that
company?
they would use
The insurance company.
available government resource once to identify the property, and they had already paid off someone using that form. And then the hired gun adjuster says to me, no, we don't do it that way. I said, you don't know what we were promised at the meeting, that you would use every form. As soon as you've identified that money should be in my account tonight. And I'm asking them for 10% per diem, per annum, per diem pay, which comes to about $200 a day.
Yeah, it's.
I mean, I feel your reasoning, but the insurance companies do have certain time periods that they're allowed to review and all that. If you have notes that you wrote where they said to you, we're gonna max you out.
300 people.
Yeah,
At the meeting.
That's a kind of a side issue. I don't think that's.
Yeah, I mean, typically a company has like 10 days to respond. They have like 45 days to
15 to respond and 40 days to pay.
Okay, yeah, there we go, better, 15 days to respond, and longer than that, right, so longer than your 20 days to respond, to determine what action they're gonna take. So,
My focus is what they
The
promised.
interest.
Yes. Okay.
Understood.
And they didn't follow.
I think we've got time for another couple of questions, and we're gonna get the soup from this room, so I'm sorry.
How about one over there after this one?
My question is actually kind of for you, Doug. Is there a listing on like county websites that have some of the new building codes that are going to be required? I've heard all kinds of things like you've got to have sprinklers in your house. and all that.
That's a question for development services. So if you go to the Butte County's website, butecounty.net, there's drop-down departments, and you can go to development services. So it's hard to pass up hands.
I know. This, one of the hardest parts of doing these is cutting people off.
So if they weren't able to ask the question here, are we gonna stay late or?
We can't, but they can, one for now, we have a forum, Ask an Expert, it had been closed because we got swamped. For now, you can use info at,
Or look on our website, if you do search on our website, I would encourage you to do that first, because pretty much every question we got has been answered someplace on the website. So if you go through, most of these have been answered. So look there first, and if not, send an email to info@uphelp.org, but just remember that when they're sometimes slow.
So, I'm not up here as much as they are. I will go outside for a while and try to answer as many people as I can. Probably what I'll say a lot to you, if you saw Cindy correct me on the detail. I'm not as good with claims as some, but I'll try to help you. So anybody wants to then get their question answered, meet me outside in the alleyway. And I'll do what I can out there. I may be telling you to.
I'm
call
so
the
sorry, I was looking at that clock up there. I thought it was, I'm so sorry, I thought it was 4:09, I'm like, well, I didn't have to.
Okay, so we got time
I'm
for a
so
few more.
sorry, we got time for some more questions.
I have two quick questions, and one is, it's, you know, the debris removal program says that it's gonna take at least a year for them to get all the debris out of there. And knowing government as we do, that probably means 2 years, right? So basically, it doesn't make any sense for us actually to start talking to contractors about a rebuild for quite some time. But it sounds like what you're saying is that we shouldn't settle with our insurance companies until we've had a contractor really be able to look at their estimates and tell us that they're good estimates. Is that what you're saying?
That is what we're saying.
Yeah, and work on it while the debris going on, you don't wanna scramble after the debris is done, you wanna be locked and loaded, you wanna be ready to move, and know how much money you have.
And my experience has been that once they get that program rolling, it goes pretty fast. The tricky part is they do need as many people as possible to participate, to kind of have it go smoothly, so there's not a lot of competing trucks in the area from different outfits.
And the second question is for Joel. I know that I saw a press release where the Department of Insurance, the California Department, asked that insurers consider giving a lump sum instead of making people go for their contents, instead of making people go through a personal inventory. But I haven't been able to negotiate that with my insurance company. Is there leverage that we can use to get them to negotiate on that, or get them to offer that to us, or if they tell us we have to go through an inventory, do we have to just do that?
Well, generally, the latter is the answer, that they don't have to waive that inventory piece. A lot of it is just it saves them time, obviously, to not have to go through the whole claim the same way as you'll have to do. And a lot of it is just the competition of wanting to be the same as other insurers. So we did put out a list of the companies that did go over I think we asked for 75% this time. So I think we listed those that agreed to do it. And then, everybody else didn't agree. a lot of what, policyholders does is make sure that people connect with other people that have their insurance company. So if they're agreeing to do that for other policyholders that are with the same company, they may do it. And also, you may be, depending on other issues you run into, again, policyholders mention this, if you're running into other problems that delay this or that, sometimes you just say, look, you gotta give me a break somewhere in this process. This is one that's particularly, trying for me because of whatever circumstances you can lay out, and probably everybody in this room, but of why this is particularly difficult, and they may do it, but we can't insist they do it.
So Joel recapped it perfectly, and I just want to kind of restate. So the insurance companies are not obligated to relieve you of that requirement that you list every salt and pepper shaker in order to get a full payment of your contents limits. But they have been doing all kinds of different things in recent years, partly because, we help people make noise together, and the department has been very helpful in putting that public pressure. That said, I've seen the companies change their positions over time. So like in Sonoma and Napa, in the beginning, there were a couple companies that right out of the box said, we're just gonna pay people their contents without making them do it. And then, that put some pressure on their competitors. But then we had the car fire, and a lot of the insurers were like, well, we really paid out a lot of money. I don't know if we should have done that, or let's set that precedent. So it's really, again, these are business decisions that they're making. It never hurts to ask. Before this sort of momentum started building to put pressure on the insurers to not enforce the itemization, we were suggesting other alternative strategies where people would say, okay, instead of, sitting there and listing every single book you have, just ask the adjuster, can I just say I had 20 hardcovers and 100 whatever? And, again, if you present them with a reasonable option to save time and money, they often will say yes. But when you come at them and say, hey, you should max me out, a lot of the time they're just gonna say, well, that's just not how we do it. So again, the other thing is that a lot of the people who got an offer to say, I'll give you the 75% of your contents without you itemizing, that's all they will get. They're not gonna give you that other 25. And if you said, okay, well, I'll take the 75% of my limits, I'll cash that check, then they're not gonna let you come back and claim the balance unless you itemize from $1 and you go all the way back, okay?
$1.
Yes, I want to know what's a reasonable amount of time to get your structure. I've had 2 different times where State Farm has come and after 3 weeks, they said to be there in 2-3 weeks. 3 weeks comes up and they send me a letter saying it's been sent back for further review. They'll be there 2-3 weeks. They did that again. And so that was 2 weeks ago, we got the last letter. And what's a reasonable amount of time? So I could expect them to actually get this appraised.
They have 40 days, to pay you technically from the time that they make their inspection. But if they need time, they can write to you every 30 days and tell you the reason why they need more time. The way to put pressure on them is to get your own estimate and send in, because that's going to force them to do, there's some statutory things that they have to do. If you send in an estimate that's higher, they have to either pay the difference, find a contractor who will do the work for their amount, or make an adjustment of the claim, which involves like getting subcontractors bids and a lot of work. So if you send yours in, that's going to put a lot more pressure on them to get theirs out. At a certain point, it's going to be too much, but really, it's hard to enforce when a company has maybe thousands and thousands of claims. They get a little bit of leeway. And maybe Joel can talk about that a little bit. It's tough. if they're trying to do something, if there's something special about your house, maybe it takes a little longer. If you have a really standard house, or even with a mobile home, should get it pretty fast.
Well, actually what happened is that I went to computer communications to Alfred, state insurance, and after that, that's when we started.
Or delays after that, retaliation.
Which is.
It's unusual, it's illegal to retaliate for complaining, but, it is unusual, keep on it. Yeah, so keep on them, and document it, so make sure you do everything in writing, and write to them and say, you know what, I'd like to know within 15 days, not just that you're working on it, what specifically do you need to get this done? Because it seems like this is taking too long. Is there something I can do to perhaps help you get this done? If you really, they have to technically tell you why and what they're working on, so.
Yeah,
ask them that.
also, if that's what they were trying to do, retaliate, that turns into what's called willful noncompliance, which can lead to major penalties for an insurer. It just doesn't ever behoove an insurance company to be petty in that regard. Not that they aren't, that's why there's a law against it. But generally, I might, if I were you, call them and say, hey, since I made this complaint, you seem to slow down the response, and I know there's a willful noncompliance piece to this thing. But
It's like whistleblower.
yeah, it just, your complaint to the department should never trigger that kind of reaction. And I can say, generally, it doesn't, fortunately.
So, just a quick question, we have extended coverage on our primary residents, and we were wondering if those would typically also be onto for outbuildings and dwellings. Does that extended coverage cover that typically, or is that not?
Yeah, typically not. You have to read your policy, read that paragraph that talks about extended coverage, because, I've seen maybe one that does. So there's an outside chance, but mostly not.
And just real quick, we have CIG insurance, so if anybody would like to offer this event over compare notes, that'd be great.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
What did you say?
He has CIG, so
Capital
if you want,
Insurance
if
Group.
you guys want to either form groups, carrier-specific groups, it's a good idea to get together and kind of share information. So,
And I apologize, we didn't bring the signs this time. Last time we did. The idea is, I'm sorry. Yeah, they're somewhere. We just, but the idea is that if you know that there are people in this room that are insured with the same insurance company as you, it's a really good idea to exchange contact information. And again, for all the reasons that we discussed, and we will, at the next one, we'll bring the signs again and help you guys group up.
If you're gonna go with a rebuild, does the insurance company have the right to hold the funds and pay the contractors they owe them, or can you give the funds and pay your own contractor if you have a preferred contractor?
Do you have a mortgage?
There's a mortgage, but.
Okay.
So typically, there'll be a fund control, there'll be an account, that's set up, a construction account, and the lender will often want to have a little bit of proof that the work has been completed before they agree to take their name off of the check for the next payment. And that's typically how it works. But again, you present the insurance company with a good reason why, you want a larger lump sum, and that may be possible, but it is it's for your own protection in a lot of situations that, that the money gets doled out in pieces as there's progress payments, because as you all know, contractors can disappear.
And just to be clear, not the insurance company can't hold it back. The only thing they can hold back is extended replacement coverage and code upgrades. They can't hold anything, and if you have depreciation, they can hold that back. The only thing, they have to pay you everything else up front.
typically goes in a lender's escrow
It's a
account.
mortgage company.
And as you'll hear further presentations that this group puts on United Policyholders, generally you want to have visible standards for when the next payout is, not just percentages, but when the roof and framing is completed or when the drywall is done, not kind of nebulous measurements. That's what most lenders will insist on before they release the next percentage.
If you don't have a mortgage though, then
You get to
you
control.
can control your own bill.
Yes, you can.
It was if you don't have a mortgage on your house, then you don't have somebody who is saying, no, we're not gonna release more money until there's been proof.
But I do think that they may only pay you the actual cash value and only pay you increments towards your replacement cost as the replacement progresses in some cases. Some will pay you the replacement once they see you have undertaken to do it.
Yeah, some will pay the replacement cost value when you've entered into a contract.
Right.
And because you basically all said, I have to pay this money, you're in a contract now, so they're figuring you're tired of it. It just depends.
Yeah, question over here, go to the far side.
Yes.
My question is in regards to paperwork that you sign. The insurance company is asking me to have to sign off so that they can check my bank account and my credit cards. Is that a normal thing? Okay.
Yeah, you can talk to me about that after.
I mean, there are situations where people put in their personal property inventory that had some really, really high dollar value items, where the insurance company would be skeptical that they actually have the wherewithal to buy those things, but that doesn't sound like it's just an
Hi, has an estimate been made for inflation due to supply and demand in the area?
So the question is, and underinsurance is partly driven by insurance companies not using good formulas to insure your houses in the first place. But there also is, after disasters, what we call demand surge, where, builders are in higher demand, material suppliers can sometimes increase the prices. But again, and that is kind of what the extent of replacement cost endorsement was supposed to be for. It wasn't supposed to make up for their shoddy underwriting when they sold you the policy, but there is no adjustment in the policy for demand surge pricing. It doesn't exist in insurance.
In Napa, Sonoma area, the North Coast Building Exchange estimated that the demand surge drove up the prices 20 to 25%. And so you can see the Amy's point. It's one of the reasons you have that extended replacement cost. And why in the future you always want that to be as high of a percentage that you're purchasing, so that it covers not only the degree of error, which shouldn't be as great as we're finding it to be in many places in the limit, but also to accommodate that demand surge piece.
Okay, so our silver lining is that we feel we've got the opportunity to kind of build our dream home now from this situation. So I'm guessing, based on the conversations and the questions, that it's going to behoove us to get an estimate for what it would have been to replace as was type of a thing. Is that also plus code and extended replacement and all that kind of stuff? So the person who's giving us our bid for what's coming up is really going to be not totally negated and not important to the insurance part of it.
Well, the value of having a contractor that's going to build a new home is that hopefully that contractor is motivated to perhaps give you an estimate for the old one so that he can move forward or she
and then how
to build that new house.
So ours was a 1968 mobile home. It was really old, really nice, but it's really old. So that code piece is just they're gonna understand how to value the difference of the code.
No.
Yeah, first off, make sure you have code upgrade coverage for mobile home
We
parks.
do.
So then you have to get a separate bid. That's one of the things I was gonna
And
say.
how do we go?
You have to get a contractor who knows what they're going to have to do. People who do the new stuff generally know, like you have to do, you know, sprinklers and, you know, whatever. So they generally know, so you have to like find some people, and sometimes you have to hire specialty people who are code people to tell them what the code was to get that, to really sign.
And then any specific questions I have about helping figure out one line in my insurance paperwork, who would I go to about that?
Well, you can bring it up after tonight, but generally you can send that to the department.
Okay.
Or, you know.
No worries.
I just wanted to restate the point that just came up, just so everybody remembers, this is, I think, really important. So many people get off track with their claims because the only documentation they give the insurance company is the house they want to build. And that's because it is hard to find somebody who will take the time and put the effort in to recreating what was. And just again, you know, it's just one of those hot button things for adjusters. They're just very much trained to be on the lookout for fraud. And so the minute they think that you're trying to build your dream house on their dime, you know, then they're gonna shut down. So that's why it just is so worthwhile to make the effort to create that second ghost documentation. And what Joel was saying is just a practical suggestion for avoiding having to pay somebody $5,000 or $10,000 to create this fictional, you know,
We're
estimate.
willing to put an extra amount, we just wanna make sure that we get what we would have gotten had we just done that replacement. And it's easy for us to drop that out of our minds because we're.
Very common.
So a comment, a clarification, and a question. I called your office about a month ago, and it was the best government office I've ever called.
All right.
The real person answered the phone immediately, and he was helpful. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Clarification.
Thanks for that.
When you were talking about having the contractor bid, if I have already received almost the maximum, and code upgrade was not fully, but it was $3,000 short, and she showed me how I would be able to get that, and extended was the same. You are talking about people who do not yet have their claim. In other words, there's no need or point to go get an estimate from the contractor. That was the clarification.
That is a
It
clarification.
doesn't
I've
apply.
talked to people who've gotten all their coverage A, they're extended, they've gotten everything. And really, unless you have a tax issue, like say you're way underinsured and you wanna write that off, then you're gonna need that. But for the insurance purposes and for your rebuild purposes, you don't need anything.
Right, I just didn't know if everybody understood that.
Yeah, and I would add, if you think that you, somebody told you you were fully insured and you were underinsured, okay, because then they might be trying to make
The
this
other
go
question
quickly.
is, so I have State Farm, and this might be useful for other people to ask. They have told us we can, with our password, go to the website where we've sent everything in over and over again. My friend also has State Farm. I've not gone to that website. He went to it recently. And so much of the stuff that he has sent through email is just not there. Now, you said we can ask our adjuster to give us what they are working with. Would that be preferable than to, should it all be on the web? I mean, I have my emails that I sent, and I have not looked myself, and I don't know if other people with State Farm.
Their email program, their upload program is really, really particular. So if you're sending things to an adjuster, in order for that email to get into your claim file, your adjuster actually has to upload it. They have to read the system that they have is really particular, and it has to have the claim number and only the claim number in the subject line. And if you do that and send it to what state, my claim or whatever at statefarm.com, it goes straight into the claim file. So if you want to make sure it's in the claim file, do it that way. And then, okay. And if you're one number off, it's gone forever, pretty much. Let me tell you, it's a very poor system.
But then you mentioned about telling the claims agent that you want
your claim file.
So
Right.
what do we ask?
So we have a sample letter and on the website that you just ask them for all documents related to the processing of my claim or all all documents in your files related to my claim, or in your possession related to my claim. It just says, you might need to do a legislative fix, because the statute says, all documents in your claim file, and I could see them saying, well, it's not a file, it's a, then we would argue it's a digital file. The bottom line is, they do have an obligation to cooperate with you. That goes across the board, that is in the law. That's why I stood up here and told you in the beginning that, you have very strong legal rights. Because your insurer has a duty of cooperation in this state that is overarching all of them. They have a duty to put their financial interests on the par with theirs. They have a duty to be timely, all those things.
So just a quick statement is, the cleanup stage 2 is supposed to be done this year.
We can't hear you.
Yeah, I'll recap.
So basically, the stage 2 cleanup is supposed to be finished within a year, is what we're thinking. And so one thing I heard is that if you do not have your permit before the end of this year, you actually have to follow the 2019 code, which includes solar, and that's tens of thousands of dollars. So you want to be ready for the next step, have your house and everything. But my main question was for you is, my boss actually did not settle for that loss of use and right away, and they basically gave him a fair market value of like $1,700 a month. He argued the fact of his location, and then also when his house burned down, it was fully furnished. So they actually bumped it from 17 to 4,000. Are they supposed to give us a fair market value of the loss of use based on a furnished house? Is there a code requiring them, or is there ways that they can loophole that they don't have to cover that?
Let me just recap the question for everyone, as far as I understood it, and then pass the line. The question is, when the insurance company and you are working out how much they owe you for the loss of the use of your home, there are generally 2 ways that they can calculate it.
So you could do it daily, and certain policies only have certain things. Additional living expense is your actual incurred increased cost to maintain your standard of living. Okay, so the cost of you to maintain your standard of living, 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, they owe you that increased cost, your rent, your food, where you're at. Some of them have a fair rental value clause. AAA is the main one here. And so AAA